On the stalled Fed nominations in the Banking Committee, Chairman Brown said today that he's refusing to move the other picks separate from Sarah Bloom Raskin. He also said that he spoke to President Biden and that President Biden is standing by Senate Democrats on this. So is the White House backing that strategy of holding all the nominees up and essentially waiting for Republicans to show up at the Banking Committee to vote?
Absolutely, and I was in the Oval Office when the President spoke with Senator Brown, so I can confirm, not that there was any doubt, that he conveyed exactly that to the Senator, that he agrees that Republicans are AWOL on the fight against inflation, and at this pivotal moment in our economy. Everyone understands we need a full Federal Reserve Board, the first one in nearly a decade to tackle inflation and bring prices down for American families. So no, we are not advocating for splitting the nominees. We support Chairman Brown's decision to keep all 5 on the Fed board, pushing them forward through the committee, and we believe Republicans need to do their jobs and show up to vote for these nominees.
You've spoken about the urgency with inflation and other issues facing the Fed, but given that Republicans have shown no signs of bending and that the Senate is poised to go on recess by the end of the week, I mean, how likely or unlikely is it that we're going to see a vote before the end of the month on these nominees?
Well, I would point you to Chairman Brown for that. He is very committed, and I'm sure, and I think as you've seen him publicly, he can be quite a bulldog when he wants to get something done. So we support his efforts to get these 5 nominees forward. There's a couple days left, and all we're asking is for Republicans to show up and do their job. They can vote against people, but not showing up is not delivering on the commitment you made to the American people when they elected you.
So let me get this straight. Republicans have been wailing nonstop, hour after hour, day after day, for weeks and months on end about high prices and inflation and how painful this all must be for the American people. And yet when it came time to actually confirm the nominees for the Federal Reserve Board, which will make decisions on how to combat rising inflation, this is how eager they were to help.
Ms. Sinema. Aye. Mr. Ossoff. Aye. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Toomey. I was. No.
Thank you.
Mr. Toomey. Do you want me to keep going? Okay. Mr. Toomey, Mr. Shelby, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Scott, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Moran, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Daines. Mr. Travis, let us call to your...
Thank you. As heard, all 12 Democrats supported all 6 nominees. All 12 Republicans were absent.
Didn't even bother showing up. Something to think about the next time you turn on Fox and Republicans are pretending to actually give a shit about Americans contending with higher prices. And by the way, this wasn't lost on any of the committee members either. Here's Senator Jon Tester, one of the most conservative members of the Democratic caucus, acknowledging exactly that.
Senator Tester.
Our constituents sent us here to vote. Nobody's on the other side. I hear on the floor every day Republicans get up and talk about inflation. And by the way, inflation is very important and we need to get our arms around it. But what group is out there to deal with market forces any better than the Fed? There is none. Yet they don't show up to vote. I think we should have the vote today regardless, just to prove to the constituents of these folks' states that they're not showing up. They're not showing up to do their constitutional duty that they were elected to do. And what is further rich in this situation is the number of nominees that came before us in the previous administration that were not qualified. But they showed up to vote for them.
But hey, maybe if Biden's Fed nominees were the same rotating cast of criminals and grifters like Mike Lindell and Mike Flynn and Ivanka Trump, they'd have shown up. I guess incompetence pays off if you're vying for Republican votes these days. And by the way, it's not just the fact that Republicans didn't show up this one time. Republicans have been consistently avoiding solving these problems. Problems, again, that they fall over themselves complaining about. Think about what steps Democrats have taken to help lower prices and ease inflation. Democrats have introduced the America Competes Act, which helps fund the domestic semiconductor chip industry, which would ease one of the worst drivers of inflation. Every Republican but one, Adam Kinzinger, voted against it. Democrats introduced Build Back Better, which 17 Nobel Prize-winning economists said would ease longer-term inflationary pressures, and the whole point of which is to lower costs for childcare, for pre-K, for drug prices, and so on. Every Republican voted against that. Even with this ongoing Canadian trucker protest, which is already threatening to drive up the cost of goods and shuttering auto factories, which, by the way, is the #1 driver of inflation in this country, responsible for 1/3 of all inflation in the US, and what are Republicans doing? They are cheering it on. From legislation to nominees to current events, Republicans are doing everything in their power to entrench the same problems they're complaining about. And the reason is clear. Republicans want as much inflation and high prices as possible because those things give them something to whine about, because that's what they do. They're not looking to fix anything, they're looking to make sure that nothing works, because then they can turn around and use that as a talking point to help themselves politically. And so even though Americans are hurting from high prices, Republicans are perfectly content to let Americans continue hurting because the political win is more important to the GOP than helping the people they were elected to serve. And by the way, I say all of this fully acknowledging that inflation is real, since Republicans' strawman argument these days seems to be that Democrats don't think it exists. It obviously exists, and prices are obviously rising, even though it's not unique to the United States. Prices in the European Union are rising faster than at any other time since the euro was introduced. The UK's inflation rate is at its highest point in 30 years. Canada's prices are rising twice as fast as before the pandemic. And we'd be fools not to also acknowledge that a number of corporations are now seeing record profits, the highest margins in 70 years. Corporate greed is a factor as well. All of this is to say that while this isn't the reductive Biden caused this message that Republicans are falling over themselves to present, it is still real, and it's something that we absolutely need to fix if only Republicans would, bother showing up. So the next time that Republicans complain about inflation and high prices, and trust me, they will complain about inflation and high prices, just remember that only one party has proposed any actual solutions, while the other party spends more time doing cable hits to whine about it than they do actually working to fix it. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.